have to sit straight on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still might be someone close. You sit here and the stage is over there in 15 minutes. It's all over. Yeah.
Yeah. Next. Welcome.
In fact, I've even rolled them up to that end, so threw them back in those corners. So you wanted to be looking from down there.
One moment, please. The leader has an activated caller. Please stand by. Turn off the music. Press 1.
You staying?
No, I need a flu shot.
You what? You need a flu shot. Oh, your camera's doing its work.
Sit at the table. Or push your chair back if you'd like, but.
You were over here. Peek around if I need you. Scott, how about you? So you're the acting city attorney now?
I am.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa, I gotta be careful.
We're just plotting.
Elevator.
It's actually a little nicer than our. She's called.
Tomorrow, 11:30.
Good music?
Yeah.
Dinner,
I'll be
lunch and
confused
music,
as
that's
to-
so nice.
Julie said you were looking for 11:30 meeting. I said, I got one for him tomorrow.
Thank you.
Trying to talk to you about the music.
About the
Beads.
Okay.
How's the full house working out for you over at the Jacobs house?
So far, so good.
Lots of activity?
It's dynamic.
And
And today, it's particularly interesting because this week is half days of school.
Oh my.
You remember those days?
Yeah, how old are Peter's kids?
They were in 5th grade and 8th grade.
Nice.
So last year in Pioneer, last year in Washington.
Okay.
What they need is a house. They want to
We tried
stay
to do
in
something
that
a little different
kind
this
of
time.
Pioneer,
I was
Washington
going
sort
to
of
be
area.
the leader.
There's not much there.
It's not
You know,
like
we
do
stumbled on a
this.
little house. It's
wait,
actually,
you're back
it's not big enough for it. It's a funky little neighborhood off of 22nd, right at
Just give me the
Boulevard.
right sign.
If you're going east on 22nd, the last turn to your left, there's a cul-de-sac in there. and
Brown Street?
Hello,
Hi Lorelai,
No, that's
Keep your-
Brown goes through.
how are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry about the confusion, but the call wouldn't let me be the leader. It only recognized you. It's like
Probably
a
too small for 4
a
people.
pack of
They want
dogs,
3 bedrooms
It's probably the rest
and
of
2
the
baths.
world with
Big little cul-de-sac.
right?
Yeah.
Just at home even would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm on also.
Hi Jay. All right, we have the CERC committee is here and assembled, and we are ready to start the meeting, Mr. Mayor.
Great, so welcome everybody. Lorelai and Jay, can you hear me okay?
You're a little distant.
I've heard that a lot. Okay, well, we'll try to do our best. Is that better?
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
much better.
Okay, that's good. All right, so, folks, thanks everybody for coming in last minute. And I say this last minute, it feels like
Hear me
the
coming.
last inning before our work session. And we have a pretty simple agenda during this noon hour, and I want to emphasize, I think in terms of our time constraints, we're going to have to wrap it up promptly at 1 o'clock. We have our main focus is the preparation that's gone into materials for our study session, which is scheduled for a week from today. It's It's intended to be just approximately an hour long. There may be an opportunity to stretch that a little bit, 10 minutes or so. But really, I do want to remind everybody that we don't have a lot of time with council on this. So I think it pays off to have the advanced preparation. And I also, in terms of what I want to walk out of here with, I want to make sure that staff are feeling comfortable in terms of clear direction of the structure of the work session for a week from this evening. That committee is feeling comfortable in terms of the materials and how they've been packaged and what our agenda looks like. That we all have an understanding of how that hour is going to flow. And then I want to be really clear about what the intended next steps are in terms of council decision-making, which includes a discussion at a business meeting, when that is actually going to occur, and what the substantive decisions, what our expectation is of the substantive decisions that the council will be making at that business meeting. So those are the things that I just want to walk out of the room with. Does that make sense? Anybody members?
Sounds good.
Okay, this is my little checklist. And Keith, Darren, Steve, make sense? Okay, so in terms of being expeditious and moving through this, we've all got actually, I think I'd like a copy of the latest, latest draft. And, materials remain in draft at this point in terms of the work session.
Very much so.
So, Keith, you want to walk us through this, or how do you
Sure,
want us to-
I'd be happy to do that, at least provide an opening, and Jay and Lorelei can jump in here. Since our last meeting on the 14th, we have continued to work on providing more clarity around how we intend to move forward with the CRA process. We've provided some updated background material. I had included a first draft in the staff report. Obviously, we've continued to work on that document over the last few days, including this weekend. We had some back and forth. And what we put in front of you today is what we would suggest going forward to council with. Basically, you can see the changes there are in strikeout and underline. They're really just by way of providing some more clarity around the context. The substance remains as we've discussed as far as the process goes, and how we're suggesting moving forward there. The other thing that I would note is a late arrival as of yesterday was an amendment to this timeline, which is page 4. It simply reflects the realities associated with the downtown plan, in that we would start our scoping process at the end of 2014, and that process will run through the entirety of 2015 and into 2016. So it just gives us a sense of that overlap. It by no means is a complete outline of the downtown planning process, at least as we understand it. We anticipate that will be an 18-month process, scoping, and then the planning process. It certainly could be longer than that, depending on how broad the scope is and where council wants to go with that. So with that overview, Lorelei and Jay, if you guys want to jump in and provide some more context and description.
Yeah, sure. I can take a first crack at it, Jay, and then I can let you fill in the details that I've missed, if that works. So in terms of our goals with putting this particular material together was to try to be very succinct, but to put the recommendation regarding how to proceed, our options, what was it, 2B when we discussed it last, within a bigger context around sort of what is the purpose of community renewal and what are the goals of the process moving forward. So that's how we organized it, with the first few paragraphs that talk about the downtown development context and the need to have something like community renewal to let the city have a more formidable seat at the table and to work more directly with private property owners in overcoming blight. And there's some more detail in there as well. Before jumping into the process and outlining the goals of the process and some of the specific steps that we think make sense in terms of moving forward with our option 2B. So we wanted to keep it short and readable, but we also wanted to make sure that that context was there, and I'm sure up for discussion today will be whether we've hit that balance correctly. Jay, do you want to talk about any of the specifics of the proposed next steps?
Well, I think it's, we tried to articulate exactly what we discussed last week, and that is to say, after providing the context, that this is hopefully an evolutionary step in a whole lot of work, frankly, that I was unaware of that the city has undertaken over the last several years. The next specific step would be for the council, if they chose to proceed in this direction, to entertain a resolution that would finalize and define the community renewal area with 2 sub-areas and would authorize the city to put together for council consideration an RFP and RFQ process that would be mailed out a month or so later. And so that would be the action, a resolution that really achieves, I think, the purposes of getting the conversation going, changing it, but not jumping to some kind of a plan before we really have the kind of appropriate input from the private sector to know what that plan could look like. We then identify a couple questions regarding the RFP, RFQ, both because they're real questions, and 2, to make sure that the council understands that they will be fully engaged in the final definition, if you will, of what the RFP, RFQ process will look like, which has not been finalized yet. And then we give the timeline. So it's an attempt to generate momentum, identify key principles and key outcomes, but without presupposing results until the city council has an opportunity to internalize it.
So I want to, if it's okay, I want to go to committee members in terms of clarifying questions for Jay, Lorelei, Keith, in terms of the materials. Hoping, there's been a easy, quick consumption of the edits that have been made here, and I think our first question is, does this look like the right information and presentation of material for setting the council up for the best possible discussion and dialogue a week from today? Either one of them wants to go first.
It sounds, when I first read it, I was impressed that it laid it out well so you could follow it. So I like how that's laid out, so I think it really is getting us to what we're looking for. But I was also looking at it not just for council, but this is a great way to also introduce it to the public. It gives it the context and so it could be taken to the public this way as well.
I think we made substantial progress in the last month. I think that I'm much more comfortable with where we are now than where we were. And I think even these most recent edits are helpful. In many ways, I was looking at this with the eyes of either another council member or a member of the public. And I think it is clear and concise. There really is just one set of questions that's on my mind in this discussion, and that has to do with next steps, and it's on page 2, bottom of the page, bullets 2 and 3, where we set up separate areas of downtown, and we segregate the isthmus from the rest of downtown, and we treat them differently. On the isthmus, we say that we are looking for comprehensive or integrated development, and in downtown, we talk about localized development. And I'm not sure whether this committee's had a thorough discussion of that, as to whether that's the strategy that we're interested in pursuing. I know that there was a brief discussion at our last meeting, and Jay, I know that you responded to a question from me about that. As I recall, you indicated that you felt that there was a greater opportunity for a comprehensive approach on the isthmus than there would be downtown. But I still think that there's a question as to whether we want to treat these two areas of downtown differently, with a different set of expectations and maybe even criteria. And just the structure of whether that's the best approach. And if we received a proposal for something more than a localized development within the downtown core, whether we'd be open to that or not. So I just don't think we've thoroughly vetted that approach.
Well, just by way of background, I mean, one of the original concepts is let's just focus on the isthmus, where, as I understand it, most of the public discussion has taken place. There are more land opportunities because the city owns a significant portion of it. And 3, let's not talk about the rest of the downtown because we have this master plan process going forward. And that first approach of just dealing with the isthmus was thought to be too restrictive because we shouldn't pass up opportunities or opportunistic proposals with respect to the rest of the downtown, but still being cognizant of the fact that a lot of the discussion that we've had with the isthmus apparently has not happened with the rest of the downtown, and there's a bigger process started. So this was sort of a compromise between those two. The other factor was one of bandwidth and capacity at the city to entertain whole lots of proposals if we were lucky enough, and to be able to deal with them in a comprehensive way. So we sort of prioritized, I guess you could say, by virtue of where the discussion has been and where the resources might be put, so that the isthmus would have a higher priority, but we would be open to at least site-specific opportunities if they arose in the rest of the downtown. So that's how we got to where we are.
Want some more? No. So I appreciate that exchange, and I think it's in some ways fundamental to the conversation that we have to have with the full council. It's not anything that we're going to resolve here. And I just want to note a couple of things. First and foremost, I think if I understand my colleagues' direction and what we want to do, what we're working towards is unanimity of the council. We want the council as a whole to come to consensus in terms of next steps. So, and that's in some ways what the work session is about, is this council really doing its best to model bringing people together in terms of different perspectives around how we move forward on this work called community development. So I think part of the discussion needs to be further addressing what Nathaniel is raising in terms of we have this debate going on. Where do you focus? you know, and where do you get the best return? We stay obsessively focused on the isthmus, it's my words, you know, but do we, you know, switch our focus to doing quick, small victories to just show that we can do something? And there's a wide range of things here. And what I'm hoping will come out of this request for proposals process is sort of a reality test of where the interest really, where the partners may be interested in investing. You know, and it's not that we have to necessarily solve this issue of what and where. I think we need to focus on how do we set the table for best success in creating the partnerships. And what I'm hoping is that at this juncture, after all of this work, I mean, we really worked hard on this, and everything from stirring the pot amongst all the, you know, people involved and trying to get people to just be brutal and direct in terms of what their fears are, their concerns are, looking at, you know, the reality in terms of the state of the dialogue that exists in this community, which we have a pretty fragmented community in terms of progressive interests. I mean, there's so many competing progressive interests in this community where people are you know, working against each other and working for competition for getting the city's focus. How do we bring all this together in some kind of coherent process for community development? So now I'm hoping we have set the table to start bringing people back together and doing things really differently. And I think that needs to be the focus, bringing people back together and doing things differently. We're pretty broken in terms of relationships, and that breaking started a number of years ago with this stuff on, well, actually it was even probably before that, but the isthmus certainly was a grand crescendo in this process. So how do we bring people back together? And I don't think we want to continue doing things the way that we have been doing them. And there's a wide range of things that are going on here. I wish people would really think critically about what they have been saying. And that's the thing that is the most important message in terms of my own perspective. I want people to think critically about what they themselves have been saying, rather than spending so much time trying to get everybody else to just line up according to their perspective and their way of the world. And if we can get people to start thinking critically about what they're all bringing to the table, maybe we can start getting people to start realizing that, you know, there is a lot of room here for collective action, negotiation, compromise that will get us doing community development in a different way. I don't think it's through, you know, trying to regulate our way to community development, and I don't think it is through a laissez-faire approach where we just wait for developers to bring any old thing to the counter. I don't think either one is right, but how do we find that spot in the middle where we're absolutely insisting that we do community development in a way that is well vetted, engages the community at large in terms of what the end product will be, and honors to the best of our ability what we all agree is an extraordinarily beautiful waterfront community where we don't want to do anything that's going to take away from its beauty. We only want to do things that enhance it. So anyway, so that's my long, rambly kind of trying to set the context for this work session. But what I don't want us to do is go down the rabbit hole of having to make all the decisions, you know, after the work session at the next council business meeting in terms of whether it's isthmus focused or downtown focused. We have several generations of consultants and experts that have all landed in the same spot and saying the best opportunity for success in terms of revitalization and development of downtown is on the isthmus. Well, you know, it's the same thing over and over and over again, but how are we responding to that? I think we need to respond to it collectively. Not force anything, but where is the city as a whole willing to go on that? And then we have other significant challenges in terms of fostering redevelopment throughout the rest of the downtown core. But you know, how do we do that? And in a way that is consistent with our other goals, both social and environmental. And in both cases, I think we need to answer the question in part by being really clear on where is the private sector willing to invest. And I think we need to be somewhat fearless about that in terms of, I don't know necessarily what we're going to get in terms of proposals, but I think that we need to set the table and to the best of our ability, make that happen. Julie?
I agree with what you're saying, and I really like that idea of the best return. And it's the best return not just for the CRA, but it's for the community as a whole. And it means we're gonna have to bring the developers and the public together, and that's why we've not been successful. The developers will propose something, and we're against it. The public wants to do something, doesn't have the resources to do it, and we don't get it done. And so it's time for us to have that discussion and to lay this foundation for us to do that. And so I think what would be helpful for the study session is I think we do need to have two approaches, because I think the isthmus and downtown and some different specific properties are different. And I think we need to just be really clear why they're different and why having two approaches is a good idea. It allows then the development community and the public to come together over and decide which one would work for both of them. And it doesn't then preclude one or the other. But I think we need to clarify how they're different and why we're doing two different approaches, because I think that might take some of the misunderstanding out of it. And it then doesn't allow someone to kind of hijack and say, well, you're focusing on one, you're doing this way. Well, we're doing it this way because of this, we're doing it this way because of this. So if we could really clarify that, I think that would help.
So let me just, thank you both. For myself, I'm very interested in seeing proposals come in both of these areas. And I think that, again, that it's when we have a proposal in hand that the public can view, that we can view, and we actually know what we're talking about, that we're going to be in a much better place than we are today. We really don't know what these things are until the private sector responds to the RFP. And so certainly we can craft an RFP and RFQ to respond to our community objectives, but again, until we see what that response is and how it manifests itself, that's when we'll be able to pass judgment over the proposals. My concern is simply that I don't want to skew the call for projects in such a way that the only acceptable isthmus proposal is one that's comprehensive. I don't want to limit what someone may propose in downtown, and I don't want to prejudge that there's, or send a message in our call for projects that we're only looking for a specific type of project, either on the isthmus or downtown. So I just want our criteria to be balanced and open and willing to work with what the development community thinks will pencil and responds to community objectives. So I just want to be really careful that we're not signaling a limited scope of types of projects that we're interested in each of these areas. So I think I get it. I think I understand the idea that our advisors have told us that there are opportunities on the isthmus that we should be cognizant of and that we should prepare for. But again, it's just, I'd like to be open to what the development community brings back to us rather than focusing them only particularly in a comprehensive proposal.
So is your concern that the isthmus is only comprehensive?
I think that this current language does signal that we're looking for a comprehensive or integrated development on the isthmus and not open to more localized development proposals.
Is that,
And that's a little concerning to me.
but is that comprehensive and integrate, that development because the public owns property?
Well, the truth is, we own a lot of property in downtown too. There's a lot of surface parking that could be something else that the city owns. And could be a part of land swaps or other types of development schemes. So I actually am not convinced that the isthmus, in terms of city ownership, is that much different from downtown. We just bought 2 parcels on the isthmus with the idea that that would help us with developing that area, but we own a lot of downtown.
Yeah, so I understand your point, and actually, there's several properties in our downtown, including on the isthmus, where as a result of city ownership, there's potential scale for a development project. And those parcels include the DOT site, the existing library site, amongst other properties and potential properties that could be traded and swapped. So I think I understand your point. My own hope is that we approach this in a way where we're encouraging the greatest possible creativity in attracting people to this process that can, show off their talents and say, I want to play here because this is a community that is only willing to invest in quality development, that this is a tremendously magical location where it deserves, something special. So I'm hoping that we can make this process attractive to the best possible talent to come in and say, this is one of the nicest natural settings of any capital in the 50 states. And so what can we do here? And understand that it's an incremental development process. It's a process though where we're willing to do things in a very different way. And also fundamental to me is we have had, we have exception. This is if only I was a wealthy man. I should write a song about that. The deal is that this is an incredible place to invest. The deal is though that no investment is going to be successful in this community, no matter how marketably feasible it is, if there isn't broad and strong public agreement that the public wants it to happen. So what I think has been consistently underestimated in terms of moving forward in development projects in Olympia is we have not paid thoughtful attention to building agreement amongst the public for what they want their community to look like and be like. So agreement is a really incredibly important requisite to success for any project here. So you have to have the market feasibility, you also have to have public agreement. And so we need to take that into consideration as we develop this process that we intend to have work. The other thing, though, is we're a very divided factional community. And the only antidote to people fighting with each other is keeping them grounded in facts and data. Not allowing any one group to do their own little spin for what they want. And if we can keep this to be a fair process that's balanced by consistent data and information, I think that will help us, again, get to a different place than we currently are at. So keeping it factual is important. So I think that, I'm just going to stop here, if I can, if it's okay with the committee, and check in with Lorelei, Jay, and Keith in terms of there's been some of our exchange that I think may help with just some final edits in terms of the RFP content.
Perhaps I could make a suggestion for an option for you to consider. Instead of drawing a big distinction between the isthmus and downtown, if people aren't prepared to suggest a priority, we could not make a distinction and basically ask, and just for this process, just say that we're going to go out with RFPs and RFQs with respect to individual properties or groups of properties or sub-areas, for example, the isthmus. And the real question is, where might the market find the magic? And what we think we know, but we don't know, is that the imaginative developers are likely to find magic around the isthmus. But I don't know that as a fact. But we could keep it more open-ended, and then just, if we're willing to not set priorities and just leave it a little more open-ended, we could do that and let the market tell us what they're interested in.
That would be my preference. Okay. Are you good with that?
I'm not adverse to that. I think, again, what I don't want to have happen is that we incentivize being, fragmented and piecemeal. I don't think that's what you're after.
No.
So what I do want to emphasize is that we have several opportunities in terms of investment. I want to, again, set the table, for all the things that I was looking for in terms of creativity. And I'm okay with that approach. I think it can make sense, as long as we're clarifying where all the what we think exist in terms of opportunities, where they are. And I certainly believe, as you've heard me say, it's more than just the isthmus.
I think that it's important to point out where we think the opportunities lie, because I think that part of what the development community wants to hear from us is that we have considered what we've got and what we want and where we're going. So I don't think just a blank slate is what we want to give them either, but I think the approach that you've articulated, Jay, works for me. But
I think in the RFP, RFQ itself, we could identify areas or sub-areas or properties, particularly where the city has ownership and or where we have found specific blight and therefore could exert ownership, and to sort of tease out for developers or to help them think about where the best opportunities are for investment. But we don't have to create a false dichotomy or competition, if we don't want to, between the isthmus and the rest of downtown at this point.
Okay. You've got 3 committee members nodding their heads. I think that makes sense. Again, for me, I think what's important is highlighting the opportunities that exist and being clear that we're identifying where city assets are that might be able to be combined with private investment for achieving community goals and visions. And I think maybe, okay, so actually before I go on to the next thing, Jay, Lorelei, any other things that you've heard in the discussion so far that you want to comment on or ask questions about?
No, from my perspective, I think it all made sense.
Okay. I've got a couple other things on my list here that I want to make sure that we cover. And I guess I want to, one sort of sticky one that I think is maybe we're not being clear about, or I just want to risk making sure that we're not, I want to risk, I don't want to go too deeply into this if we can, because we only have at best 15 or so minutes. So there's a very clearly expressed interest in the public of having predominantly a park on the isthmus, where the Capitol Center Tower is removed and replaced with a park. And I just, for one, want to check with the committee. I want to acknowledge that that is a legitimate interest from some folks in this community. And it needs to be placed in a position where the full community can comment on that just as they comment on any other proposal that comes out of the RFP process. So this is not an attempt to say that that proposed option or use of isthmus property is going to be excluded from this mix. What I'm hoping to clarify here is that what we will do is factually present to the public at large through this whole process options that are very clearly clarified for the public in terms of what the options are, what resources will be required to make each of those options happen, so that the public can actually see comparatively what could be accomplished. But this is not an attempt to just squeeze any one perspective or view out of the puzzle. It is a matter of bringing everything forward factually and making sure that as these sessions go forward, everybody gets to make a pitch in terms of their creative. What do we do? What are our options? What's it going to cost? What's the yield in terms of public return? But it's not to belittle any option. It's not, and I'm generally getting nods of affirmative. So I just didn't want to leave that unsaid. I think that also needs to be clarified in terms of part of our process. So let me just pause and check in with Lorelei and Jay again. Does that all make sense, Jay and Lorelei?
Well, I would even go one step further. It would seem to me that when we go out with the RFP and the RFQ, to the extent we talk about the opportunities on the isthmus, which is different than the opportunities elsewhere, we are looking for imaginative ideas, visions from developers that will respect and enhance the public's interest in view corridors, active and safe parks that can be maintained, and thus shape the developer's response in a way that honors what people want. But they can all be rejected, and there'll be negotiations if they're lucky enough to get a serious developer. But we're not going to ask a developer, I don't think, to give us a proposal in which nothing is built and it's leveled as a park. I mean, we want to see where a developer can further the vision of those interested in parks consistent with some economic development, which I frankly believe may be important to sustain a viable park. But anyhow, we would incorporate that legitimate vision into the RFP, I believe. At least that's the way I envision it.
It seems like it becomes a discussion around whether we have a criterion specifically around a requirement for including some open space, or whether it's just part of the overall decision-making process. But at the highest level, we're all on the same page that there needs to be some consideration about open space development associated with anything that happens on the isthmus. If for no other reason than the fact that that's been so much a part of the public conversation, and there are some ties associated with the funding that used to purchase that property to open space development.
So, okay, if I respond. So I hear what you're both saying, and Jay, I just want to go back to your comments and perspective, which I agree with. But here's the challenge for me. I agree with your perspective, and primarily, I think one of our tests for making any kind of ultimate choice as a public at large, but eventually as a council, whatever path we go down, in terms of whatever kind of project we engage in, it has to be feasible. It has to be viable. It has to yield a clearly quantifiable public benefit. There has to be a return to the public. I'm happy to express my own bias that I don't think 100% park on the isthmus, carrying the Capitol Center Tower down and putting a park there, I don't think that's a viable option. I don't think it's a feasible option. However, I think it needs to be vetted and talked about at the public at large, and anybody that wants to bring that proposal forward deserves the opportunity to creatively present how that could work and how it could be viable. And although it might not be driven by a private developer, I think some folks want to make the case that that's what happens, and I think that just should be there as a part of a fully legitimate process where we're making sure that everybody's given the tools that they need to present what they think is their best idea for what happens on the isthmus or anywhere else downtown. Jay, so I just want to go back to you. Does what I just say make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not exactly sure where it comes in. I mean, what I want to do is squeeze as much great park out of the development and the developer that I can get. Right. And then ask the question, is it enough?
Yeah.
And we may find that the developer's not very interested in that. I think if we get a really good developer, he will have an integrated project that has, it's in his benefit to have a good park to support the economic stuff there. Whether that's enough for the city and the populace to be determined. But I agree with you that we should always keep that open. But you can't ask a developer to come in and build a gigantic park.
No, and
you've got to build a park consistent with and in furtherance of.
I'm not pretending to go down that path, but Cities do sometimes embark on a full public works project that is initiated by a city or by a parks district or any number of different things. I don't want to beat this one into the ground here. I have a feeling that we are going to continue to discuss this element a little bit in terms of making sure that the table is set for any creative proposal, rather than it's all got to be one way in terms of an approach.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that I think that's the key element of this is that as we go forward, we're not going to preclude that option of a community group coming
Right.
forward and saying, here's how Isthmus Park could be built. And then we can analyze and compare that to the other
Alternative.
project development scenarios that we've received, if any.
Okay, so I've got a couple elements that I want to vet with everybody. So I want to switch gears to talk about the timeline as it's being proposed. And this is, just a very simple Gantt chart with tasks and dates. Everybody looking at the same thing? So there's a couple elements here, there's two elements specifically that I'm thinking are missing from the process that I want to check in with staff and committee members about including. So those two elements are first having what, for lack of a better term, I can describe as a resource symposium, but an opportunity where we bring potential resources to the table to explain to everybody how they work and how they might be fit into the development process. So my best example of that is bringing potentially through our existing contract or enhancement of our existing contract between the city and the National Development Council, but bring them to the table to explain how they